Right now, the very latest on U.S. travel and trade to Cuba. It's been nearly a year since President Trump implemented policy changes that tighten travel restrictions with the communist-ruled nation. Are people still heading to the island? What impact have those restrictions had on businesses? And what does really the economic outlook for Cuba look like? Lots of questions. Here to give us some answers. Two experts on everything Cuba. Our good friend on tiempo, Vito Echevarria from thecubastandard.com. Grant Cohen from CHACO Travel. Welcome to both of you. His website, an online website to help people get to Cuba. How are you doing, my friend?
Great, just great.
Todo bien, right?
Oh, yeah.
All good?
Yeah.
Man, lots of changes.
Yeah.
One of the reasons I wanted to have you back on the show, because it seems, apparently, according to surveys, that fewer people suddenly are interested in the wonders, the beauties, and the joys of Cuba. What have you been seeing? What have you been finding? Why is that happening?
I would contest that to a certain degree. There's always been pent-up interest in Cuba. What has happened, though, is that, when the Trump administration, when Donald Trump made his announcements about his changes to Cuba in June of last year, he kind of hyped up the changes that he was going to make. And the changes that he drummed up were going to be bigger than they turned out to be. Okay. So he caused a lot of confusion during that, and I believe that's what caused some confusion within the marketplace in terms of who can and cannot go to Cuba.
Do you feel, Grant, that confusion has led to the, I wouldn't call it less interest, but less numbers, less people actually going?
Yes, I do, and I think that's mostly to do with the fact that the rhetoric was more extreme than the actual changes that were implemented.
Give me an example. What did he say, and what actually is the reality?
Okay, so the biggest change for the average American traveler is that under the Obama-era rules, you were allowed to go to Cuba as an individual, keep track of your own records, as long as you were contributing to civil society and assisting the Cuban people, you were following U.S. regulations.
All right, and then?
The Trump changes essentially got rid of the individual category. So now you have to go with a sponsored organization. What that means is an organization that is subject to U.S. jurisdiction.
And are you getting the impression that people just said, all right, well, if that's the rule, then forget it. I'm suddenly not interested.
That has come up, but less frequently than what happens is that, so for example, when I speak with potential clients, the first thing I hear is usually, are there regulations?
Oh, so they
just have no idea.
They have no
and the other, for the other, I'd say 30%, it's they don't know there are regulations. They don't even know that that's a topic.
Okay.
And so they want to plan a beach vacation to Cuba.
Right.
They don't realize that that may not be permissible.
And once you illuminate them, if you will, on those restrictions, is the phone call over?
No. Actually, I would. For those folks who are traveling with the intent to do a resort-type vacation, it is over, yes.
Okay.
But I'd say the vast majority do end up going on our trips. It just takes a little bit more selling on my part to explain that people-to-people, educational, cultural, these things are not bad. They're good.
They're good. They're good.
So
Vito, do you find it ironic that the slower interest is happening when right now there are more flights and more cruises to the island than perhaps ever before?
Yeah, that's the thing. The thing is right now, if you're following the situation with cruises in particular, those have been ramped up. You have Carnival, you have Royal Caribbean, you have Norwegian Cruise Lines, for example, offering more cruises than ever out of South Florida, into Havana, right? And they have the airlines along the pre-existing flights from the different Florida area ports, Newark, and here at JFK. You also have more flights coming up this fall, in particular from Boston and some other cities, I think like Houston also, and Atlanta. So basically, there is a lot of confusion in the marketplace. It just takes some initiative for people to clear up what can and cannot be done with Cuba. The bottom line is with the Trump administration, what he's stressing is he wants to make sure people go there as part of a group.
As part of a group.
As long as it's an educational group.
Sit tight. I got a few more questions to ask you. Some of them politically oriented because there's a new leader in Cuba, and I want to see what impact that's having. More when we come back on U.S. travel and trade with Cuba. Still ahead on Tiempo, New York City sends attorneys and social workers to provide legal assistance at the U.S.-Mexico border. Cuando regresemos. Welcome back to Tiempo. We've been discussing U.S. travel and trade with Cuba. It's been about a year since President Trump implemented some policy changes that tightened the travel restrictions with the communist-ruled nation. With us this morning, our good friend here on Tiempo, Vito Echevarria from the CubaStandard.com, Grant Cohen from CHACO Travel. Again, welcome to you both. One of the things that I wanted to be sure to ask you is that for the first time in 59 years, there's not a Castro running Cuba. How will the leadership of Miguel Diaz-Canel impact travel to the country?
Basically, him being in office means is that there's a continuation of the system under the Castros. There are changes underway, under the radar, basically. You have a situation, the Constitution, for example, they're tweaking with that right now. I think one of the things people should look at is the fact that they're recognizing officially private property. Which is a significant socialist system. So that's something to take a look at. And there's some other areas as well, but in my opinion, that's one of the areas that people should look at. And, the tourism economy is more important than ever in Cuba. So, basically, they're going to make sure they do everything they can to expand upon that. I think the whole situation with private property means it's, welcoming more foreign investment. That's what that's really about. Very quickly, before I get back to Grant, do you find that people in Cuba are seeing this slowdown in American visitation, and the result is a hit to the economy and a hit to those tourist dollars? Well, where the hit really is with the so-called cuento propistas. These are the independent business people that range from taxi drivers to those renting out, hotel rooms, bed and breakfast units, that is. Those individuals in particular who are using Airbnb to attract customers, those are the ones being hit by the changes. I will say, though, that, those using Airbnb, I'm sure they're making up for the, loss in Americans with Canadian other travelers. From Europe and other places. Yeah, pretty much. Grant, I don't want this to be a bummer for people who are thinking about going to Cuba, seeing the fact that there are restrictions and regulations, and suddenly deciding that it's not worth the effort. Talk to me a little bit about the fact that it's still a worthy trip, it's still a worthy investment, it's still a worthy place to go. Yeah, on multiple accounts, that's all true. I think the first thing I want to point out is that going with a sponsored organization is actually the best way to go to Cuba. Way to go anyway, not individually, right? Exactly. And I'm going to give an example that our company, CHACO Travel, we facilitate multiple events that are exclusive, not open to the public. So unless you were to go with a company like ours or another company that provides a similar service, those doors are not open to you. Those doors are not open to you. Exactly. And then the other issues that we will eliminate are money changing, which can be very difficult in a country such as Cuba. And transportation. Transportation is an absolute headache there, not just for tourists, but for Cubans also. It's the biggest, in my opinion, the biggest problem on the island. Internet is still a challenge? Internet is challenging. It has progressed, but for an American traveler, I would suggest you go there with the plan to disconnect for the week. And that if you absolutely have to, set up an online email account. You can check that. And without going into too much nitty-gritty, we were discussing earlier that, like Gmail personal accounts work, but Gmail business accounts do not work. So it's a little bit hit or miss, and the connection speeds are slow. But again, that's where an organization would be tremendously helpful in terms of if there needs to be some sort of communication back home. Absolutely, and that's one thing that we do for all of our travelers is if they need to, we will make sure they get, to buy an internet card, like a scratch card, sign up, get them to a hotel, a public place where they can use the internet, and make sure it gets done. We got about a minute left. Put your finger up in the air and test the political winds. Do you see things reverting back to the way they were during the Obama administration, or these restrictions in any way getting loosened up again? Yeah, I think what Trump is doing is temporary. I think at some point, him and his administration, they're going to come up with something else for Cuba where he's going to be able to put his name on it. Because that's what Trump is all about, putting his brand, his name on everything. Will that happen as a result of pressure from hotel organizations, groups, the travel industry? A lot of business groups clamoring to deal with Cuba because the irony is that you have some businesses there that have been grandfathered in despite the Trump changes, such as Starwood Hotels. They're still operating 3 hotels there. All right, for example, Airbnb is still operating there, and of course the airlines and cruise lines are still very much there. So because of all that, there is a lot of pressure on the part of business groups to still get in there. Travel to Cuba, as always, a moving target. Vito, Grant, thank you for the education. I appreciate you guys coming on.